myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true.
Hi, welcome along to Steve Wraith's podcast, and I'm delighted to be joined by Nigel Ely. How are you, Nigel?
Yeah, great, Steve. Thanks for the invite, buddy.
Yeah, great to have you on, mate. And I've watched with interest. I mean, a lot of people who tune into me podcast on a regular basis know that I've got a fascination with true crime. Also got a fascination in the military campaigns, and we've had a lot of ex-military on the show. Peter McAleese, obviously Andy McNabb, just to name but two. And the Falklands story is something which always fascinates me. And when I saw your book on Amazon, Goose Green, which the links for this particular book are below, I decided to look into you and obviously came across a few of your other books, which I'll mention in due course. But this one had a particular fascination because obviously as a 50-year-old man myself, it's a conflict that I actually lived through. And with the Ukraine situation, developing day by day, it's a sharp reminder, that we're always on the cusp of something, in this kind of vein. So, yeah, I just wanted to go back to it because obviously there's been big anniversaries. There's been a lot of media and a lot of programs about the Falklands. So we will, focus a fair chunk of that program on this. But first of all, like I do with all my podcasts, I just want to go back, Nigel, just to your childhood. Whereabouts were you born? Where were you brought up?
Well, I was born in sort of South London, an area right on the border of South London, a place called Orpington. It was sort of, when I was still cutting about the place, there were still bomb sites there from World War II, late 60s, early 70s. Working class family, went to comprehensive school, used to cut around South London, running with sort of the gangs at the time and that, and getting into a bit of trouble, as you do.
Was it a happy childhood?
Yeah, both my parents were stayed together. They weren't divorced. There's a lot of them are these days. It was a great childhood. Both my parents were hard grafters. They worked all the time. I've got two brothers. Sadly, my older brother, Clive, passed away a few years ago through cancer, and that's who the book Goose Green is dedicated to. But yeah, I had a great childhood, but I knew there was something different within me.
What were you like at school? Were you a bit of a scholar, or were you like me? I was a bit of a class clown, I've got to admit, Nigel.
Well, I couldn't wait to get out. I mean, I left school at 15. I did take certain amount of exams, and I remember that you had to pay £1. So when you left school, the head teacher could forward on your exam results. Well, I never got them. I took a few O levels and GCSEs as they were at the time, but I was more concerned with getting out of school.
So obviously getting out of school, you must have had an idea or a thought about what you wanted to do. What were your ambitions at the time?
Well, this is a fault of the secondary education as I see it back then. I had no idea what I wanted to do. It was either sort of, that's quite a cliched expression. It was either down the mines, in the print, or in jail for sort of a working class boy like me. There was no direction from the education authorities to push the boys or girls from working class families into sort of areas, perhaps government, perhaps the seat of power and stuff like that. There was none of that stuff. It was just you were the sheeples, you were the plebs. You just get on and do the graft, and while all the rest of the guys and girls that went to sort of had privileged backgrounds decided to take the seats of power and rule over us.
So what was your first foray into work?
I worked for my uncle up in a place called Spitalfields Market, which was a fruit and veg market like Covent Garden, but not as well known. It's now closed into luxury flats now, but that meant getting up at sort of Sparrow's Fart. That meant getting up about 3 o'clock in the morning, and then going to London, Spitalfields Market. Coming back, I was home in bed for about 12. So that was my first sort of move into work. I mean, it's quite grueling, really, at that age, and getting up at those times.
So where did the move into a military career come from?
Well, I was getting in trouble a bit. You know, I was running with the wrong crowd in South London, and I knew that something was going to happen. A friend of mine was home on leave, a school friend, home on leave from the Green Jackets at the time, and basically he said to me, "Look, you know, why don't you join the army? It's pretty good." And we were sort of mates at school, so I thought, well, okay, I'll give that a go. But I said to him, what should I join? And he said, well, you join the Marines. And I said, all right. And I remember reading those commando comics at school. They were all sort of First World War, Second World War cartoon comics. And I was sort of pushed towards the Marines because they were always there. They had a great PR at the time. They still do. So I went and joined the Marines down in Blackheath, actually, South London. I passed the initial entrance exam, and they told me to go away, go and have some lunch and come back, and they'll carry on with the test and let me know if I passed the first test. So I went back in the afternoon, and the sergeant said, well, yeah, you passed all the tests to join the Marines, but we can't have you because you've got a police record. And I said, what do you mean? Well, he said, you stole a car when you were 15. Well, yeah, I did. I borrowed a friend's car to get home. And but I was told that was never going to be put on my police record. But anyway, so I was a bit devastated with that because I'd set my heart on joining the Marines, Royal Marines. And I said to the sergeant, what can I do? And he says, well, you can go next door and join the paras. They'll have you. And because that time in Blackheath, the Navy recruit office was next to the Army recruiting office, that's exactly what I did. I went next door, signed up for the paras. He said, go next door, the paras will have you.
Fantastic. Great stuff. So I mean, you know, just tell us a little bit about the training. I mean, I had a documentary on my YouTube channel for many years. I think at one point it had about 1.2 million views, and I took it down. Wow. And then much to the annoyance of a lot of former P Company members, I had to put it back up. It wasn't my copyright, that's why I took it down. But that documentary was on in the late 80s about P Company. Took you through the process. So you know, I'm presuming you've seen it. You've obviously taken part in it. What was it like for you being part of that training regime?
Well, I never knew anything about the paras. I literally didn't know anything about the Army or the Marines. But yeah, I mean, I found it hard because I was kind of, I wasn't sinewy. I've always been built for comfort, not speed. You know, I played a bit of rugby in my early time at school and when I left school. So I was a bit of a drinking lad, you know, for that drinking culture, not carrying weight, but stocky. I found the first 6 weeks of para training quite intense, and that's every recruit in the Army has to go through 6 weeks training. Because you're being told what to do, you're learning how to march. Actually, you're learning how to shave, how to look after yourself, all the hygiene stuff, which, you know, it doesn't really get taught. Well, certainly not from my family. It sounds awful now, but you know, it's stuff that you're meant to learn as you go through life as a young man. But they teach all that in the Army, and in particular in the paras. That culminates in halfway through the training. There's a process called, as you said, P Company. Now, P Company is a series of 4 days, I believe, in my time, and it still is now, of physical tests. And yeah, I mean, one of them was the log race, which was I'm not sure of the distances, but I mean, I found that most incredibly hard. There was like 6 or 7 guys on a log. There were 6 when we finished over the line, and we had to drag a couple of them over, and 2 dropped off. That was quite intense, and I remember that particular race because they awarded me the flag, which was like a sort of best well done for that particular event. I mean, there was a Trinasium, which was a test which is about 40-50 foot up in the air, where you have to run along sort of these scaffold boards, and then you have to jump into nets and stuff like that. Then you have to stand on these parallel bars right at the top and touch your toes and read out your Army number. And then, of course, there was a stretcher race, and then a 10-miler. And then there was milling, which has been taken up, I believe, by the rest of the Army, which is just 1 minute of pure aggression, boxing in a boxing ring.
Yeah.
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 I found it very, very hard, but I passed first time, and that was quite important to me because I was I was up against these young. I was 19, 20 at the time, and I was up against these what we called Hitler Youth. They were junior paras. They'd been in since 16 years of age, and half my platoon was made up of these guys, and they knew the score. They knew all the ins and outs of training, how to look after yourself, and they knew all the shortcuts. So I was quite pleased that I actually passed P Company first time.
Yeah, incredible. It's a big jump from Spitalfields Market and, and getting yourself in with the wrong crowd to go into that. How did your parents feel about that jump?
Yeah, well, the old man, they've both passed now, bless them. But the old man didn't say much. But my mother said to me, and I distinctly remember it, saying, "Nigel, you're not cut out to do this." And I wasn't quite sure at the time what she meant. Whether she thought her son, her middle son, was the shining star or what, or whether she was just turning a blind eye to what I'd been involved in previous. She said something like, "You hadn't been brought up like this." So I found that a quite strange turn of phrase, really. But they did encourage me eventually, and I think they became proud of me. As I say, unfortunately, they died quite young, and it's when you get into sort of the last sort of quarter of your life that you wish you could then start to talk and ask questions, about these things that your parents have mentioned. But one of those things. Yeah,
of course it is.
Regret.
So obviously you pass out first time. What was your first posting?
First posting was to Berlin with 2 para. I was posted to the 2nd Battalion, the Parachute Regiment, and I spent the last couple of months in Berlin. And the interesting thing about that was I was one of the last British soldiers to do a guard on Rudolf Hess, the Nazi that was, I think, only one of them given life. And he was being guarded by the Russians, the French, the Americans, and the Brits. It was the term under I believe, the Nuremberg trials, and that's what we had to do. Each country had to guard him for a certain amount of period, and I did the last guard on Hess. Yeah, that's the memorable thing about Berlin, apart from the fact that the Germans eat and drink an awful lot.
Did you have any communication with him?
No, none whatsoever. I got this image of me looking down. He kept a garden. I've got this image of him. I got looking down and doing his garden, but that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, fascinating.
Yeah.
So obviously, from my perspective, getting you on the show was to talk about your new book, and this book is a fascinating insight into Goose Green, and as it says on the cover there, the decisive battle of the Falklands War. But when you sign up and you go through, what you went through with P Company, and you go to places like Berlin, and you do your first posting, are you thinking about war? Are you thinking about the cold reality that war might bring? And are you looking to go to war? Is that what you want because that's what you've trained for, or are you not even giving it any thought? What was Nigel Ely going through as a young man?
Well, I don't think I was different in my thoughts. Yeah, you wanted to go to war as a young man. You wanted to put your skills. You wanted to pit your skills against the enemy. Generally, you wanted to kill them. That is kind of, now in hindsight, quite gruesome, but that's what you are at the time, a young man. You wouldn't do it with your 35, 40 or 50. But remember, Steve, before the Falklands, I spent 2 years in Northern Ireland. The 2 para went on tour in Northern Ireland, so we spent 2 years in Northern Ireland, and we lost 16, 17, we lost about 20 guys in a couple of small incidences, but in one big incident, Warren Point, of course.
Yeah.
The same day they blew up Mountbatten and killed him. We lost 17 guys there. There are 18 guys, including a couple of non-paras. So the battalion was already blooded. We knew about war, and being in what they call bandit country, Northern Ireland, which was a lot of our tour was made up of doing stints down in Fort Kill, Crossmaglen. we were well adverse to the weather, the cold weather, working in the green kit, as we call it, as opposed to the black kit, which is counter-terrorist stuff. So when we went down to the Falklands, or told we were going, ordered down to the Falklands, we were kind of all ready to go for it. You know, I mean, literally, we were more than prepared.
Yeah, and you know, it's become you know, a major talking point over the last few months because of the anniversary. Take us through it from your first arrival there. What was it like when you first arrived at the Falklands?
Yeah, well, it's funny you should say about the 40th anniversary. I'll just digress slightly, Steve, because while it's fresh in my mind, the reason being is that the 40th anniversary, as we were sailing down south, the rear party, which is the unit of two para which look after the barracks when the battalion's away, whether it's up north on the ranges, up in Thetford, or whether it's away, you know, over in Afghanistan doing stuff. It's called the rear party, and the rear party were actually hosting the 40th anniversary of the Bruneville raid. Now, what's the Bruneville raid? The Bruneville raid was the first operational task for two para, C Company two para, my company two para, to go out and take a German radar station and take it out, and they did it successfully. And the irony of it all is a lad in my village is in two para C Company, just by chance. And 2 weeks ago, the whole of his company went over to France to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the Bruneville raid. You know, so these things go in 40-year blocks. And I found that really strange and nice. And I said to this lad, I said, well, you going over there? You going for the parade? He said, yeah, but mainly we're going on the piss, you know, which of course you would do. You'd do your parade, show your respects, have the memorial service, and then go for a beer with the locals, you know.
Brilliant.
That's a strange thing. But yeah, getting back to, I was in the first landing craft to hit the beach of the Falklands. God knows why they put the paras in the landing crafts first. They should have been the Royal Marines. They had been trained to do it. In fact, 2 months previous, they had done a full commando assault on the beaches of Norway. So they were well prepped for it. Most of us had never been in a landing craft. Seriously, we'd never been in a landing craft. We'd only seen it from World War II pictures. So we hit the beach. I was meant to be in the second landing craft with Colonel Jones, but because the first landing craft had hit this kelp, this seaweed, and it sort of stopped the landing craft's advance, we obviously took over and we became the first one to land. We landed, it was an unopposed landing, thank God, but the Navy had softened the target up. So as we were approaching, you know, you had the naval gunfire going, and so it's pretty sort of spectacular in that sense. We were met on the beach by some SAS and SBS guys who said the beach was clear, and we think, oh, thank God. But then we had to get our way up to the high ground before daylight, before first light. And yeah, it was just incredibly crazy because we had this, you know, we had over 100 pound in weight in our Bergens. We were carrying mortar rounds. We had our webbing, our weapon, all the ammunition. So it was pretty strenuous getting up there, to the fact that not all the battalion made it up to the top of these mountains called Sussex Mountains. So and that's when the first Argentine airstrike came in. The brave Argentine pilots, I mean, they flew, you've seen the news footage pictures of them flying so low through San Carlos Bay, which was the bay which we overlooked when we were on Sussex Mountains, and the bay where all the naval ships were. So that was quite an incredible thing. And the ground really was like Northern Ireland. Cold, wet, boggy, with these rock runs, just like patrolling in Northern Ireland, but on a much, much vaster scale.
I can imagine, you know, from your perspective, I guess, on arrival, you know, it's a job to do, and maybe the morale is quite high. But, you know, as this war, and it was a war, but it didn't, you know, it didn't go on, you know, for a long period of time. Everything was condensed into such a short period of time. But did morale suffer when, you know, the Navy suffered at the hands of the, you know, of the airstrikes?
Well, yeah, I mean, I can tell you that the armchair generals and soldiers back here, 20, 30, 40 years on, say that the battle for Goose Green was not necessary. I can tell you that it was necessary, because the troops on the ground were seeing the Royal Navy getting the shit kicked out of them, the great Royal Navy, and the blokes were getting so pissed off and really sort of worn down with it. The morale was pretty low. And on top of that, you saw the Royal Navy getting strafed, and the bombs hitting the ships and being sunk. The Argentine Air Force coming and strafing over the top of our mountain. And to contend with, we had the weather. You know, it was non-stop raining. Blokes were piss wet through. And then of an evening, it froze. And then it was, you know, then in the morning, the sun came out, and then it hailed. It was just like you had 4 seasons in 1 hour sometimes in the Falklands. And the wind, of course. The wind was the killer. And we needed to get off that mountain pretty damn fast. And we needed a victory. The task force needed a victory, and I think the folks at home needed a victory, because before then, okay, we'd sunk the Belgrano, and then the Argentine Air Force had sunk the Sheffield, and then we lost the Antelope, and then we lost the Atlantic Conveyor, which was the big container ship, which carried all our cold weather kit, all our batteries, all our helicopters, apart from one Chinook, which managed to get off. That was Bravo November, quite a famous Chinook, actually. So the blokes were going, what the hell's going on? We're losing this war. And it was a case of we're losing this war. So I believe Colonel Jones pushed for us to attack Goose Green, because it wasn't on the way to Stanley, but it still had an air force there. It had a Picara ground attack aircraft from a sort of airstrip runway. And the Argies had secured about 120 civilians, taken them hostage and put them into the community centre, where they'd been there for 3 weeks in utter squalor. So I think Colonel Jones's push to get the battalion moving off the mountain was great, and then to go and attack Goose Green was even better. And the brigadier at the time, 3 Commando Brigade, who was a Marine, Brigadier Julian Thompson, he accepted the fact that we needed to get off the mountain, and even to this day, he says that was a good call from his part. Contrary to what the armchair generals say.
Yeah. What was your views on Thatcher's leadership at this time? I mean, were you aware of the rallying calls? I mean, there's footage and photographs of her, coming out and trying to boost morale by, being there at the front line with the troops, and what was your feelings on Thatcher, or did she not really come into your mindset?
Yeah, look, I have to say this as someone that's sort of, on the left side of centre, but not too much. Yeah. I jump over, I hop over. She was great for morale, because she was like a warrior, and she did give the troops the morale that was required. Although we didn't get too much news from back home, she was behind us all the way. And I do understand that she got a second term on the back of the Falklands. I totally understand that, but that's politics. But as a young Grundoon on the battlefield, on the front line, yeah, we thought she was a fantastic warrior. Great calls for us.
So take us through Goose Green and the final stages of the Falklands War. Take us through that.
All right. Okay. It's quite a long. I'll try and so we moved off Sussex Mountains, and because I was C Company, which is basically the patrol company, it's like a mini SAS within the battalion, the Pathfinders we were called. We were Colonel Jones, who was the CO, the commanding officer of 2 Para. We reside in Ears, so we would go off and find out where the enemy were, bring up the rifle companies, and then put them in position into what we call a start line, which is a imaginary line close enough to the enemy not to be compromised, but further enough away to put an attack in to make with maximum effect. Yeah, so speed, aggression, and surprise. So we went and reckoned the start lines for the battalion for the attack on Goose Green. Everything went well. And then A Company got stuck up on a position called Darwin Hill, which was a pimple which overlooked Goose Green. It was about 800 meters away from Goose Green, and where the Argentines had this fortification on top, A Company took a long time to clear it, which stopped the speed part of the assault. So D and B companies were over to the right, and they had to slow down too. But they were doing trench fighting as they were closing through this ground around Goose Green. There were trenches, there were pockets of Argentines in trenches, but the main focus was on Darwin Hill, and this is where A Company got bogged down because they had a lot of Argentinians up there firing all sorts of things, mortars, artillery, heavy machine guns. That pinned A Company down. Colonel Jones then came up to find out what the hell was going on. He then effected a mini assault where unfortunately he got killed. But that kind of broke the back a bit. And then A Company then put a full assault on top of the mountain and took the mountain. As that was happening, C Company, which we were the reserve company, moved forward through A Company's lines, who they just secured it. I mean, it was carnage. It was really, I'd seen the carnage like that at Warren Point to see our dead and dying mates, but to see it in actual warfare with the enemy still there, the odd angry shot, enemy being attended to by our medics, the dead being put to one side. It was, people running around, where's so and so, where's Bill, where's Jack, and all this, and have you seen so and so? It was well, I mean, it was just absolute carnage, and it's how you would see a Second World War movie. I mean, that's what it looked like. I mean, we were still fighting with tactics from the Second World War, and that was the way we were trained at the time, and probably still is the way it should be done now. You have to put troops on the ground to clear an area. This can't be done by robots or drones. So we moved forward, and then within about an hour, we were told we're going to put C Company, which were only 50 men, we're going to put the forward attack onto Goose Green. D and B Company were to go right flanking, while A Company were going to hold the high ground on Darwin Hill. And I remember looking down just before the attack and seeing all the Argentinian soldiers all down by the aircraft, the Bacar aircraft. There were hundreds of them mingling around. And we thought, why aren't they firing at us? Because we didn't have the weapons at 800 meters to fire back, although we did have GPMG on SF, sustained fire, but they were limited. Why weren't they firing at us? And we didn't know that until we started to advance down the hill. I thought that possibly the Argentinians thought we were them on top of Darwin Hill, and they'd repelled the Paras, or the British troops as they would have known at the time. So then we were given the order to advance, and it was like a billiard table, straight down into this sort of settlement of Goose Green. We just advanced to contact. We advanced in what they call a arrowhead formation. So there's one guy at the front, two behind, then 4, 6, 8, 10. Depicts a arrowhead. I was point man. That's what they call the guy at the front. For some reason, I was put there. And then we got about 200 meters advanced to contact, and then all hell opened up. We got mortared, artillery, heavy artillery, Oerlikon guns from left to right, which were these 20mm cannons that were anti-aircraft guns. Then later we found out they had Bofor guns they took off the ships. You see them on Second World War. They put these big cases of rounds on top of this gun, and they just go boop, 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 boop. They had that in the ground roll, and they was chewing up the grass around us. And I ran like hell. So did a lot of guys. But our HQ element, which was in the middle center of this arrowhead formation, got taken out. I mean, one guy survived, one killed. All the rest of them were sort of badly injured by the incoming fire. Lots of guys got it. We're still advancing. We had to keep the speed of them and the momentum of the advance. There was a couple of trenches I cleared. There was another trench that after the estuary, it was a command trench bunker in an old pig farm that they'd use the pigsties and turn them into sort of like mini fortification overhead cover. Cover from view, but not cover from fire, of course. I fell into one of these trenches. His oppo was dead. There was something under my feet. And I couldn't bring my weapon down because it had the bayonet on it. And I just sort of headbutted what was underneath the poncho, this tent. Even to this day, I kind of don't like talking about it, but I guess it has to be spoken about in a sense of, well, it was 40 years ago, and that's it. And I try not to disseminate or look into anything too deep these days. It is what it is. I stopped when I thought the whoever was underneath was dead, and then just carried on. I mean, you just got to keep the momentum. You don't think about it. I didn't think about that incident for a long time. Even after through the SAS, it was in the back of my brain all the time. Didn't think about it at all. And it pops up every now and again, but that's all right. And then eventually we got down with hardly any ammunition left. We were using Argentine ammunition. We actually used their rifles because their rifles were better than ours. And it was like getting dark. It gets dark very early in the Falklands. It gets light about 10 o'clock in the morning at that time of year, and it gets dark about 4 in the afternoon. So you get limited daylight. We had loads of wounded. We had 20 odd Argentine prisoners. It was getting dark, and we were still in the firefight. And you can imagine the 20 odd prisoners all bunched up together, and there's Argentinians 20 feet away from us and still firing at us. So it was that close thing with it, with the tension and the ability to move anywhere without being shot at, and with these prisoners behind. And all of a sudden somebody shouted aircraft coming in, and we thought that was the Harriers coming in to bomb whoever, and it turned out to be 2 Picaras. They came down, strafed us, pulled up, because I guess they saw the prisoners, I'm not sure, but one of them came round again and dropped napalm on us. So this one didn't see the prisoners because he dropped the napalm, which just absolutely infuriated us because it's against the Geneva Conventions for a start. And it dropped us about 20 feet yards away from the prisoners and from me, and it sort of tumbled. So the momentum went towards Goose Green, and the big fireball, flames erupted and sucked all the air out. Couldn't breathe. I mean, I was that close. Although it was going away, I had this little moustache and sideburns at the time. They all got singed. It was. But you didn't think about it. You just carried on. You just thought, bastards are dropping napalm on us. And the one thing I take from that incident, even today, is that the guys were so professional. They could have quite easily killed those prisoners, being a threat, but they didn't. There was one prisoner, an officer, who still had his sidearm. This is how quickly we were advancing through. We hadn't been able to disarm him of his sidearm. Yeah. And one guy tried to tell him to take his sidearm, put his pistol away, and he wouldn't. So one of the lads butt stroked him. In the middle of a battle, this was. Yeah. He went down, we took his pistol off, and then we told one of them, I didn't, but one of our guys told this officer to look after his man. One of his men had lost his leg from below the knee, and he was really in agony. And look, we didn't have any medical supplies. We didn't have our medics with us. We had our combat medics within our patrols, but the rest of the battalion was up behind Darwin Hill. Mm-hmm. I mean, the stretcher bearers had to come down and pick up some wounded halfway down the hill, all under fire. And that's when the medics came down, but they couldn't come down to where we were. We were sort of too far. You wouldn't want anyone to come down where we were because you would lose them. We were actually in dead ground. Yeah. So any medics that had to come down, or stretcher bearers to come down, would actually get it before they got to us. So, with the napalm, it just shocked everyone. Then we had to put the attack on what they call the schoolhouse, which is the biggest building in the Falklands Island at that time. And I didn't even know where it was. And someone told me to look at 7 o'clock, and I looked at my 7 o'clock, and there it was. Because you're only concerned with the little square meters that you're advancing through. Mm-hmm. You and your mate. And then we put the attack into the schoolhouse, set that on fire. A lot of Argentinians ran out down the beach side because Goose Green was set in an isthmus with sea either side, and it was only about half a mile wide. This whole area of terrain we were advancing through, so it's quite a small. excuse me, it was quite a small area we advanced through. And we saw all the RGs running down, and the strange thing was, in the book, one guy is described seeing these couple of Argentinians run, and blokes are shooting at them, and this guy Steve Taylor's saying, "Oh God, I hope he gets away. I hope he gets away." A bit like that scene in A Bridge Too Far.
Yeah.
Paras, when all the paras are sort of wounded up at the house, and they get supplies dropped, and they think it's more ammunition or food or medical supplies. So they get, obviously, the battalion runner goes out and picks up one of these containers, and he's running, and everyone's going, "Come on, come on, come on," hoping that he'll get the container and pull it back and get the supplies. And he gets there, and he opens it up, and it's all full of maroon berets, and then sadly gets shot. But that was the type of incident. There's still that empathy within that battle, that the blokes were there. It's still the empathy, which I still hold very, it's very warm. I hold that feeling and those stories in the book Goose Green.
Yeah, you can tell that, and I mean the book is a great read. What was it like for you personally when you heard the announcement that victory had been secured and that the white flag was flying over Stanley?
Yeah, well, the thing was, 2 Para were the first ashore. We were the first to have the victory, a victory on land. We were the only battalion to fight 2 battles, the Battle of Wireless Ridge, and we were first into Stanley. At the end of the Battle of Wireless Ridge, which was the closest feature to Stanley, the capital, Port Stanley, some people call it, we were told to hold firm, and we knew what was going to happen. We knew that they were going to bring the Royal Marines up and get in before us. But it didn't happen. We disobeyed orders, and we marched into Stanley. I mean, we were taking prisoners from a Huey gunship landed and surrendered to us. As we marched on the road to Stanley, there was a few dead Argentine soldiers there. The fires were being, but the old angry shot coming out. But we eventually, 2 Para eventually got in to Stanley, and we raised the Union flag and 2 Para flag outside Governor's House. And it was only a day later that picture of the Royal Marines putting up that flag outside Governor's House, that was a photo shoot, a bit like the raising the flag at Iwo Jima,
Yeah, propaganda.
But because the Royal Marines, the Royal Marines have a big PR. Can't blame them for it. They've still got a great PR. I mean, I didn't believe it was over until I was on the boat going home. That's how it was. I guess mentally we were completely and physically drained, having been on the land for over a month, exposed conditions, lost our mates, lost our CO, fought two battles and won. It was pretty, in such a small time frame, it was pretty something to be part of. It was just incredible.
Piece of history, and it's something which as I say is being talked about a lot in this particular period of time, with it being the 40th anniversary. The return home, and again, I've seen some amazing footage of this. I lived it. I mean, although I was only 10 years old at the time, I remember the parades. I remember the unity, the celebration, and what was it like from your perspective coming home to that, and again meeting your parents?
Well, it was for the men of 2 Para, for the soldiers of 2 Para, it was a different experience, because we were first on the island, and we were first off, quite rightly so, in my opinion. We took the Norland, which was the ship that sailed us down to the Falklands. We took that back to Ascension Islands, and the RAF flew us back to Brides Norton, which was kind of nice. And our parents were there to meet us. But like a lot of guys, including myself, my mum and dad came all the way out to meet. And I just said, "Look, Mum and Dad, I'm sorry. There's absolutely no way I can go home." So they took me to Aldershot. And another regret one has, because they're not here. I wanted to ask them about it, that incident. But I wasn't the only one. There was loads of us. So we went back to Aldershot and went on the piss for 2-3 weeks. Literally, that's all we did. I don't think I spoke to my mum and dad. And I look back at it now and I think how fucking selfish, how inconsiderate. And that's something which I do regret, you know, that the fact that I robbed them of, you know, time with their son. But I just was not physically able to stay in a house with them and go back to the norms of life. What had happened to me and the rest of us was quite shocking. It was, I look back at it now and the events that the things that we did in such a short period of time, I'd find very hard pressed to see if it happened in any other war. And I do mean that, First and Second World War, because, you know, I'm quite well read up on both of them, but the actual way everything was condensed from getting there to getting home, it was just really quick. That's what I find fascinating about interviewing the guys for this book. It took me about 4 years, and we had the COVID. I interviewed I met over 200 of my ex-2 para and civilian crew for the Norland and Navy. Whittled it down to about 114, and there's over 300 vignettes and little tales about the battle, the beginning, the middle, and the end. And the end is up until modern times, how people feel now.
Yeah, the trauma is a big thing. Sorry to interrupt you, Nigel. The trauma is a huge thing, and I think that is something which, I mean, my very first film that I did was about PTSD. I did it with Joanne Froggatt. It was before really, even then, the government hadn't, you know, accepted it, you know, as part of being in the military, and it's a huge thing, isn't it?
It's massive, yeah. It's massive now. They have what they call decompression now, don't they? When you come out of a war theatre, they take you to Cyprus if it was in the Middle East, and you'll spend 3 days decompressing before they put you back into society. Whereas we were just, you know, we still had blood under our fingernails, you know, and we just went on the piss. And I don't think they actually understood about PTSD. I still don't think they understand it, but they are, to credit to consecutive governments, they are trying to understand it, but they certainly don't give enough support to soldiers. They certainly do not do it. You know, that's a subject for another time. But it does annoy me that they can spend so many billions on all sorts of things, but they will not look after the men and women, the veterans that have gone through hard times. They just will not do it. They will employ an army of bureaucrats to try and figure out what's going on, and you know, there's a feast on the table, and they'll give the veteran a chicken leg or something, you know, a chicken wing, and they'll take the rest of the budget for themselves. It's quite disgusting, really.
Yeah, no, it is.
It really is.
Amazing recollections about the Falklands. I wouldn't be doing you justice as an author if I didn't mention another one of your books, and it's got a rather interesting title called "Bring Me the Arse of Saddam." And of course, anybody who's watching the podcast who doesn't know who Saddam is, it was a man who used to look like this, who then ended up looking like this, and you've just got a rather interesting story. So, without giving too much of it away. The photograph that I have of you is with the arse cheek of the statue that was toppled, and it got you into a little bit of bother, Nigel.
Yeah, the left back. I should be on your true crime series. Well, very briefly, one of my hats I wore, I was an independent photojournalist, and I was working over in Kuwait at the time, doing some military stuff, and thought I'd cover the invasion, as I call it, the invasion of Iraq. So I got my all my accreditation to become a photojournalist. Teamed up with Sky News, who had a Maverick team there, and the guy that was running their security, a one-man guy, friend of mine from 2 para from the SAS, a guy called JY. We met each other. we said, yeah, you double up as a security guy, and you can use our comms. So that's what I did. I went into Iraq for day one of the war as an independent, unembedded journalist, along with the unembedded Sky News team. We broke a lot of stories, got into Baghdad 3 weeks later, just after they'd pulled the statue of Saddam Hussein down in Furdor Square. Jeremy Thompson, the anchorman of Sky, and all the Sky team went and did all the backslapping at the Palestine Hotel, which was the hotel where all the world press stayed under the eye of Saddam. And I went up to see the American Marines to have a look at his statue and sort of see if I can get a piece, just a small little inch piece of it. They managed to smash off, with the help of a sledgehammer and a crowbar, a big piece of his left buttock. And that's what it is, a big piece of his left buttock. Anyway, I took it back. I used it as basically as a ballistics piece of anti-ballistics. I stuck it behind my chair when I was going back to Kuwait from Iraq, and got stopped at the border by the Kuwaiti army. They didn't believe I'd been to Baghdad, and they just looked at that and thought, well, what's that? And I said, well, along with the sandbags, I said, that's for protection. They understood that. A few days later, I decided to bug out back to UK, went down the local souk, the market, found the biggest sort of suitcase I could buy, put it in there, went through British Airways, and they said, do you have any extra baggage? I said, yeah. And they said, what's in there? It was funny times, remember, because Kuwait had just been scudded by Saddam Hussein. They launched a few Scud missiles into the city of Kuwait. So I said to the guy jokingly, I said, oh, that's Saddam's arse. And he went, yeah, okay, that'll be £328 extra baggage, please, extra baggage allowance. I said, fine. So I got that. Anyway, years later, I went through a second divorce. So the house had to be cleared. I remember seeing this piece of bronze in the potting shed, as I describe it in the book, and decided to try and raise money for the Royal Centre for Defence Medicine and the American Hope for the Warrior, the charities that look after the wounded when they came back from Iraq or Afghanistan, because that was still very much at its height back then. I tried to sell it at auction, but I got arrested and charged with United Nations sanction order, Section 8, stealing Iraqi cultural property. Then they charged me for that, bailed me several times, really screwed around with my life. People that don't understand about bail, it really does screw with your life. You can't fly. You have to inform them whatever you do. Under the terms of my bail, they hunted this arse up and down. They persecuted me and the arse. And I just couldn't believe it. I just could not believe that I'm trying to do something good. No good deed goes unpunished. And I had the wrath of the Derbyshire police, because that's the Met Police got it because after the auction, and it didn't make its reserve of 250,000, I was driving home with it, and I live quite sort of in deepest Herefordshire, and I got this call on the mobile, and it says, "Oh, this is a friend." It was a no number, and I thought, well, it could be one of the press, so I better take it anyway. And this guy said to me, "Oh, this is a friend," and I thought, well, what are you on about, you knob? Just get on with what you've got to say. I said, "What do you mean a friend?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, I'm a friend. This is no duff," and no duff in military terms means, this is not an exercise, it's an operation, it's true, basically it means true. So I said, "Oh, okay, pal, what you got?" He says, "Have you got the arse?" And I says, "Well, who wants to know?" He says, "Well, put it like this, the police are coming to arrest you and the arse." So I went, "Why?" He said, "Well, because it's, you're being charged with this, Section 8, stealing Iraqi cultural property." I said, "Okay." He said, "Right." I said, "Well, when are they coming?" A bit cheekily. And he said, "What's today?" I said, "Friday." He said, "All right, how about Monday?" So when he came down Monday, and that was another story, the way they came down. But I haven't been able to resolve the situation. Make a cracking film, would make an absolute cracking story because it's funny. It's all about the establishment, me having a go at the establishment having a go at me for something as pathetic as this. And I reckon the reason why they wanted it so bad was because some Iraqi apparatchik had put pressure on someone in the British embassy in Baghdad for a contract. That's how it is. It's all about money. Give us the arse back and we give you this contract. To me, it's as cut and dry as that.
Cheeky, mate. Cheeky, that's what it is.
It's certainly cheeky. If people ask me, they always ask me the question.
Unbelievable, mate. Unbelievable.
They always ask me the question about the arse.
That is a great story, and let's hope it gets resolved one way or the other at some point.
Are you going to ask me the question?
Go on, then.
Ask me, where is it now?
Where is it? You're not sitting there, are you?
Yeah, well, this is what I like. Yeah. You'll have to edit this out, I think. Yeah.
No.
Where is it now?
Yeah, well, we'll do. I'm not going to ask you. I don't want to put you in that position. What I want people to do is...
I tell you. If people say to me, where is it? And I say, well, I gave it to Gypsy Pete, and for some reason he gave it to Ken the Nose. And I'll leave it at that. Because that's kind of...
I want people to buy the book because the book itself will give you plenty of laughs. And if there's any script writers out there who fancy tackling that as a potential screenplay, I think you should do it because it's a hell of a story.
Because I own all the rights to that arse book. Yeah. I own everything. I own the territory. I own everything because I set it up myself. Yeah,
fantastic.
It's not with a publisher.
Well, there you go. That's a great potential concept for anybody out there who wants to get out there. Just quickly before we finish off, security and surveillance is what you went into, and I don't want to dwell too much on it because potentially it's another podcast in the future, I think, with you. But just moving into that, is that just a natural progression from being in the military, Nigel?
Yeah. From someone from my background, yes. But of course, it's gone so technical now. Absolutely so technical because the advancement of the digital age. So the smart money's gone out of the bodyguard, all the contracts in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, because everyone's pulled out of there. Okay, so it's more technical now, and I'm not sort of I'm of the wrong generation. I live quite a secluded life. I cut trees down. I live in a remote cottage. I do writing. And I try and live my life as clean as possible. I'm sort of live off grid. Okay, so I grow my own vegetables and I kind of enjoy life. I've gone from this mad warrior to I don't know, sort of like Hugh Ferning-Whitting. What's his name? Hugh Ferning-Whittingshaw. Come. Jeremy Clarkson type character in a sense,
Yeah, well, that's good. You're still here to tell the tale and to share these fantastic stories. Any regrets, Nigel?
No, none whatsoever. I've had a great life. I've had a great career. I've experienced an awful lot, and it's taught me an awful lot. War teaches you lots of things. It teaches you to grow up pretty quick, and it teaches you actually to appreciate the very, very small things in life, like a nice hot brew, like a drop of rain, like a drop of sunshine, like the leaves on the trees. And, it teaches you to appreciate Mother Nature and what a lovely world we live in.
Yeah, fantastic, mate. Well, look, please, everybody who is watching the podcast, get yourself onto nigelely.com. He's got a great website. He is very accessible. If you've got time as well, get yourself on Amazon or his website and get the books. Fighting for Queen and Country is a bestseller. Fantastic book. That's a good place for anyone to start. After that, I don't really think it matters, but for me, this one is what we've focused on today. Goose Green, which again, if you're interested in more modern day war, because obviously a lot of us are well read on the First World War and the Second World War. But if you want to read about Goose Green and an inside story at the Falklands, then please get that. This one, as we've already discussed, Bring Me the Arse of Saddam, is humorous, if not showing how ridiculous the law can be at times. And if you're into your security kind of books and that kind of thing, we've had some great bodyguards on here. Of course, my background was security as well for many, many years. The Gun for Hire makes another great read from the best-selling author, Nigel Ely, who has been very kind to give us his time today. Much appreciated, mate. I want to wish you all the best for your endeavours. And if I do get any whispers from anybody on the film circuit about transferring that into a script, I will give you a shout, mate.
Thanks, Steve. You've been a great host. Unbelievable.
Thanks you,
very
mate.
much
Listen,
for the invite.
God bless you. And I want to dedicate this show to all of those, of course, who lost their lives and didn't come back from the Falklands on both sides of the trench. Take care, Nigel.
Thank you, Steve. Good luck, buddy.